Story 1. Bryan Cranston. Going from the goofy dad in Malcolm in the Middle to the cold, calculating Walter White in Breaking Bad felt like watching someone unlock a cheat code for acting. Story 2. David Tennant as the antagonist in Jessica Jones. I only knew him as the 10th Doctor, so seeing him be so genuinely menacing was a shock to the system. Story 3. Leslie Nielsen, the guy that did all the hilarious Airplane and Naked Gun movies. All I had ever seen him in was those wacky comedies. Then one night I was watching some old 1970s detective show, and Leslie Nielsen was playing a serious role as a cold-blooded killer. I mean, I suppose he did a good job, but it's Leslie Nielsen after all, so every scene I was just expecting him to bust out some crazy sight gag or something. Story 4. At the time, most people were not familiar with Leonardo DiCaprio when What's Eating Gilbert Grape was released and were surprised that he was just acting. Story 5. Stephanie Beatriz from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The first time I saw her interviewed, I realized that the character she played when she was undercover as a hairdresser was actually her, and the rest of the time in the show, she was playing someone who was totally not her. Story 6. One actor who really surprised me was Steve Carell in Foxcatcher. Seeing him completely transform into the cold, unsettling figure of John DuPont was a huge shock, especially since we all know him for his lovable, goofy roles like in The Office. Story 7. I'd only ever seen him in The Fifth Element, and then when he was Sirius Black, I was like, why did they give an American that role? I then saw him in an interview and was surprised. Story 8. The Penguin. I kept going back and forth between watching interviews with Colin Farrell and watching The Penguin. It was really hard to recognize anything of the same guy in that character. I was amazed. Not just a different attitude or situation. It was a whole different person from the ground up. Well done, Colin. Story 9. The two Hughes, Hugh Jackman and Hugh Laurie. I had no idea they were not American because of how well they portrayed Logan and House, respectively. Laurie was so good that I didn't even realize I had already seen him once in 101 Dalmatians. Story 10. Louise Fletcher. She was supreme in any role where she could be an evil sociopath. She won an Academy Award for her portrayal of Nurse Ratched, but I remember her most as Kai Wynn on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Such a smarmy character. I had the pleasure of meeting her twice at some of the few Star Trek conventions she attended. The lady was an absolute marshmallow of a person, sweet and soft and kind. Everyone who worked with her has said similar things. Story 11. Tom Hanks in Cast Away. Seeing him completely isolated and transforming physically and emotionally was a striking departure from his usual warm, approachable characters. Story 12. Jesse Plemons. For the longest time, he was always the lovable, goofy friend from Friday Night Lights. Then he started absolutely nailing these serious, sometimes unhinged villain roles. Dude is a seriously talented actor. Story 13. Kunal Nair in Criminal UK. If you only know him as the sweet, sensitive, nerdy Raj from The Big Bang Theory, you will not be prepared for his performance as a cold, unhinged sociopath. He was genuinely chilling to watch, and his angry outbursts have even more impact when compared to the very tame ones Raj used to have. Raj would barely raise his voice to a shout and never swear. In Criminal, he yells, pounds the table, swears, and punctuates his sentences hard. Also, he has a beard in Criminal. Story 14. Katie Sagal blew my mind in Sons of Anarchy. I grew up with her as Peggy Bundy, and of course there's Leela. Nicole Kidman in Destroyer is another one. Kind of a flimsy plot, but her performance is really impressive. Story 15. Timothy Olyphant in Santa Clarita Diet. I had only ever seen him in grisly gunslinger roles, and oh my gosh, I've never laughed so hard at who I thought was a non-comedian. Story 16. David Schwimmer in Band of Brothers. Going from awkward and goofy Ross to a serious, hard-ass drill sergeant was shocking. Kept thinking, what is Ross doing here? Story 17. Anthony Starr is like the exact opposite of Homelander, which is a good thing, obviously. He's a more soft-spoken, goofy Kiwi man with dark brown hair. The first time I saw him out of character was in some Hot Ones segment, and I was blown away at how incredible his acting was as Homelander for the shift in mannerisms, accent, and how he talks in general. Story 18. I think what's always striking is that even the actors and actresses playing nerdy, awkward, and insecure characters are all extremely attractive, confident, and charming in real life compared to most other ordinary people. Sometimes you just forget what normal people look and sound like when you watch Hollywood movies. Story 19. Daniel Day-Lewis. Dude could have sat next to me on the subway 1,000 times, and I wouldn't realize I was ever next to Bill the Butcher, Hawkeye, Lincoln, and so on. Story 20. Nichelle Nichols, also known as Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek, plays a vengeful, foul-mouthed madam in the 1970s blaxploitation classic Truck Turner. Isaac Hayes is the star, but she totally steals the movie. Story 21. I am not sure this qualifies, but when I saw Rowan Atkinson do The Maigret, a very dark French police drama, after seeing the Black Adder series, The Mr. Bean, and all the silly faces and voices, to see him do such a quiet, dark character without a comic moment was just astonishing to me. As John Lovitz used to exclaim on Saturday Night Live, acting! Story 22. Zac Efron as Ted Bundy in Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile. Such a departure from High School Musical and The Greatest Showman. Goes to show that maybe child stars need to play a murderer to break that child star image. Story 23. Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort. One of the best portrayals of a malevolent antagonist in cinematic history. You can hate Harry Potter as a franchise, but no one can hate Voldemort as a character and Ralph Fiennes for bringing him to life. Also, Mark Hamill as the Joker way back when. Story 24. Ever see Larry the Cable Guy out of character? Even his accent was embellished for the character. It's the same way with Pee Wee Herman. He, Larry the Cable Guy, and even Andy Kaufman would stay in character for interviews or promotions. I doubt we've ever seen the real Andy Kaufman. Story 25. Seeing Cara G, who plays drummer in The Expanse, doing interviews with other cast members was a shock. I didn't expect her to be drummer, of course, but she can be so adorable and goofy off-screen. We don't talk about Alex. Story 26. John Lithgow, after knowing him as the goofy, insecure dad on Third Rock from the Sun, did a surprisingly utterly convincing psycho on that one season of Dexter. Total deadpan. Straight through crazy and out the other side such that you start wondering, maybe it does make sense to be killing these people. In spite of previous expectations, wacky hijinks did not ensue. Story 27. I only knew Ryan Eggold from the New Amsterdam show, but this week I binged this new show on Prime called Cross, and oh my god. Story 28. Tom Hiddleston nailed his Loki role so well, and his interviews are different where he's friendly, laughing, and playful. His roles in Crimson Peak and High Rise are serious and different. Story 29. Mel Gibson when he played Macbeth. He blew my mind because his execution of the role was fantastic. It was so removed from the Mad Max movies, and I really never knew that he was such a capable actor. Story 30. Tropic Thunder was my first exposure to Robert Downey Jr., but that feels like cheating. Other than that, hearing Christian Bale's real accent threw me for a serious loop as a kid. Story 31. Dominic West playing McNulty from The Wire. Dominic West is the poshest person in the world. Literally lives in a castle to play McNulty and American detective Fred West and Noah Soloway. What an actor. Story 32. My sister and I watched Rob Roy with Liam Neeson. The next day, she was watching the comedy film High Spirits and yelled for me. When I came to see what she was yelling about, she asked in bewilderment if I knew the guy who was playing Martin, the ghost. I had no idea, but he was a long-legged, good-looking guy who had perfect comedic timing. So I stayed to watch the rest of the movie, and when the credits rolled, both of us said in unison and in disbelief, Liam Neeson? Fans for life, I'm telling you. Story 33. Hugh Laurie is House, but have you seen him in British comedy sketches? I can't even believe he played House so well. It would be like Rodney Dangerfield nailing the role of the Godfather. Story 34. I met the wrestler Kane Glenn Jacobs in 2000. He was just a normal dude. It was a bit jarring because, especially back then, wrestlers still largely clung to the blurring of the lines of reality and tended to stay in character at least partially even when the camera was off. I also met Taz just after he entered the World Wrestling Federation. He was doing an appearance and I went up to get an autograph. He was super friendly and gave me a bag of M&Ms. I was 13 or 14, I think, and he said, "Hey kid, you like M&Ms?" And I said, "Yeah." And he pulled out this giant bag of M&Ms and handed them to me. Mildly bizarre but cool. Story 35. If you only know Imelda Staunton from Harry Potter, watching her in Pride is quite the shock. You keep feeling anxious, waiting for the bomb to drop, only for that fear to quickly disappear as you watch this actress become a completely different person. Many great examples are in this thread, but for me, this was the time I truly understood what it actually means for an actor to have real range. Story 36. Hugh Laurie in House. This posh British comedian, who I knew from a bit of Fry and Laurie, Jeeves and Wooster, and Blackadder, plays a curmudgeonly American doctor. Story 37. Gary Oldman in anything. He is a chameleon when he plays characters. His posture, accent, speech speed, hand movements, and personality are so different for each role that I struggle to recognize him in anything he plays until I see the credits. Story 38. Sir Christopher Lee. Knowing him as Saruman and other roles like this, it cracked me up watching him in an old Edgar Wallace movie playing a Chinese detective. Such a weird combo. Story 39. I'm a huge John Hamm fan. His portrayal of Don Draper was amazing, and whenever I see him outside of that role, I am amazed at his talents. I even loved those insurance commercials he did years ago. Story 40. Tom Holland in The Devil All the Time. I've only ever seen him in Spider-Man, so seeing him in a dark and dramatic role was surprising, and he was really good in it as well. Story 41. Denzel in Training Day. The whole movie was cognitive dissonance for me because I kept waiting for him to be revealed as a good guy. Can't believe no one else has mentioned this. Story 42. Imelda Staunton in Maleficent. I only knew her as Dolores Umbridge, so to see her as a flighty, happy fairy was just absolutely bizarre to me. Winona Ryder in Stranger Things. I had to check the Internet Movie Database to realize it was her, after knowing her as the stylish Lydia Dietz and similar roles. Brent Spiner as the eccentric Dr. Oaken in Independence Day, after only knowing him as the clean-cut, straight-laced Data. Story 43. The kid who played Joffrey on Game of Thrones is an absolute sweetheart. Unfortunately, he did such a good job that he basically ruined his career before it started. Story 44. Bryan Cranston from Malcolm in the Middle to Breaking Bad. Adam Sandler from Silly Movies to Uncut Gems. I was shocked that he can truly act. Matthew McConaughey from typical romantic comedies to Dallas Buyers Club. Story 45. Immediately came to mind, Charlize Theron in Monster. It was years later I realized who she was and how beautiful she is in real life. Not even just the difference in looks, but in voice, accent, mannerisms, everything. She was absolutely outstanding in that role. Story 46. The first time I watched The Prestige, I did not realize it was David Bowie playing Nikola Tesla. Such a cool role. Denis Villeneuve has said they intended Bowie to play Niander Wallace in Blade Runner 2049, which would have been so cool if that could have happened. Oh well. Story 47. Dominic Monaghan. We started watching Lost last week, and it threw me off, not seeing him as a fun, sweet hobbit. I'm used to it now, though, and enjoy his arc so far. Story 48. Henry Cavill. When he got the role in The Witcher, I thought, what the heck? As I had only seen him in Superman. Then I saw The Witcher, and my jaw dropped. Completely transformed. He was, for all intents and purposes, Geralt. Then, as an encore, I later discover he's British. Seriously talented. Story 49. David Ogden Stiers. He played Major Charles Winchester on the TV show MASH. I was shocked later to see him in an interview and realized he was nothing like his TV character. Story 50. I had, at 18 years old, seen Emily Blunt in an independent film called My Summer of Love. I never saw her in anything else until I watched her in Victoria years later, and her acting was beyond phenomenal. Story 51. It has to be Tom Cruise who gets this, when he played the rap music dancing in Totally Wild, Profane, and aggressive movie producer Les Grossman in Tropic Thunder. Story 52. Most non-American actors that play American characters have real accents and voices that always throw me for a loop because I only know them as these specific characters. When I see them in an interview or meet them in real life, I am always taken aback by how they really sound. Story 53. Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems. Almost all of his movies are just silly comedy and jokes, but Uncut Gems was one of his first serious roles I saw, and it impressed me how much he nailed it. Story 54. Larry Linville, who played Frank Burns in M*A**H, was a total sweetheart and beloved by his castmates. He played the conniving Burns so well that it's odd seeing him be a decent guy in other roles. Story 55. Rodney Dangerfield in Natural Born Killers. That was my first introduction to him. Then a year or so later, I watched Caddyshack and was very surprised. Story 56. The comic and presenter Bradley Walsh in Law and Order UK. He nailed the whole ex-alcoholic struggling with demons, trying to do the best job he could as a character. Story 57. The first thing I can remember seeing Gary Oldman in is The Fifth Element. Once I saw how he really looked and sounded, I realized I had seen him a lot more than I knew. Dude is a damn wizard. Story 58. Sophia Helen, when she plays Saga Norn in The Bridge, never smiles and stays in character so well. She is brilliant. Out of character, she is completely different, which is why it seems strange when she smiles. Story 59. Annie Murphy in Kevin Can Go F himself. I had only really seen her in Schitt's Creek, and I was pleasantly surprised to see her excel in a totally different character. Story 60. Pam Ferris as Trunchbull in Matilda, mainly because she was working as a horrible person with young children. The child actors didn't actually appear to be scared working with her, so she must have warmed their hearts behind the scenes. Story 61. Larry Drake was not well known when he started on LA Law, and I bet a lot of people assumed he was actually developmentally disabled like his character.